Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this discussion on crowdfunding with Kickstarter. I'm happy to introduce our guest for this afternoon. This conversation is being held by Tori Farley, Tyler Farley, and Danny Walsh. Tori, who graduated from Northeastern in 2015, and Tyler, who graduated in 2019, founded Better Than Belts, a suspenders brand, in 2019. Danny Walsh, a 2018 graduate, is the co-founder of Peak State Coffee, which has coffee infused with functional mushrooms that improve everyday wellness. In starting these ventures, they have worked with Kickstarter, a global crowdfunding platform. Crowdfunding is an alternative financing option where small amounts of money from a large number of people help fund a venture or project. Again, please answer any questions in the chat. And now, Tori, I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thanks, Bernice. As mentioned, and as everyone knows, we're going to talk about crowdfunding your venture with Kickstarter today. And we're just going to get right into it. So we'll do some quick introductions, really talk about some basics that you should know before really committing to Kickstarter, and then dive in a little bit to the algorithm and making the algorithm work for you. And then Tyler and Danny will dive more deeply into what our stories are, what we did right and wrong with our own Kickstarter campaigns. And then the best part, we'll do some live QA. Anyone who has questions during it, as Bernice mentioned, please throw it into the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So as Bernice mentioned, I'm Tori. I'm one of the co-founders of Better Than Belts. I studied entrepreneurship and marketing while at Northeastern, and then spent about 4 years working in health and tech startups in the greater Boston area. My focus was really on paid marketing and business intelligence, data analytics, before I decided to co-found in 2019 Better Than Belts with my brother, Tyler.
I'm Tyler. I graduated in 2015 and I graduated in 2019. I was like, that doesn't sound right. I studied entrepreneurship and essentially worked in tech and marketing, similar to Tori, just with much less years of experience, and always had a strong interest in fashion. Had started a dropship clothing company just after my freshman year. And Better Than Belts was the idea kind of came during my senior year at Northeastern and then launched in the summer following.
Hey everyone, I'm Danny, and I introduced Peak State into the world in April of 2020 of all times. And we've introduced a line of coffees with benefits. We have a light roast for focus, a medium roast for boosting immunity, and a dark roast to help with de-stressing. And I originally was a mechanical engineering student at Northeastern before going back for a second lap and getting my MBA. I have experience in the product world, product management and product marketing, and that's what excited me to launch off on my own and do Peak State full time. So excited to meet you all and hear your questions today.
All right, so first to start, a few things that you should know about Kickstarter. Kickstarter does self-report a lot of metrics on their platform, and they have reported that 61% of all projects fail. And that can vary a little bit by industry. Today, you get to talk to people in fashion and food, two of the highest failure rates, which will be fun. But it's important to know that it's not a platform where you can just set up your campaign page and then expect the backers of Kickstarter to come fund you. There's really going to be some marketing work and some algorithm work that you're going to have to put into it. A couple of details. Kickstarter is all or nothing. And what that means is you set your funding goal and you set your timeline. And if you don't get that funding in that timeline, the people who have pledged money to your project won't be charged and you won't get anything. So it's really important to set a realistic funding goal. When you're setting your funding goal, you should also take into account that Kickstarter actually takes about 8% of your final funds raised. That's in Kickstarter fees and credit card fees. So you want to make sure that you build that in. Kickstarter also owns the emails of your backers. You don't own any of them in terms of ability to market to them after the fact. So Kickstarter is really controlling the experience. And when you need to contact your backers, you put out an update on your Kickstarter page, which is kind of like a community forum and people can like and comment on it, but Kickstarter will then email on your behalf your backers that you've posted an update and what that update is. But if you want to be able to market to those backers after the fact, it's important that you gather their email addresses in another way. Kickstarter also has an algorithm that you really need to understand in order to make it work for you, gain visibility during the length of your project. So we're going to spend some time now really digging into that algorithm. A lot of other founders and data scientists have data mined and tried to figure out what successful projects have in common so that they can repeat that. And a few things that we found to be really helpful are here on this slide. Fully funded projects have video project headers, not image headers, and really they should be under 60 seconds. A lot of these fully funded projects actually reach 30 to 40% of their funding goal on day one, which I know can seem pretty daunting. That's a huge chunk of your funding goal, but there are some ways that you can kind of engage and promote backers to pledge early. And one of those options is offering a limited early bird special. And that's just a reward tier that's only available in the first 24 hours. And that could either be a mega deal, even better than the other reward tiers that you have, or it could be something you're not offering in any of your other reward tiers to really incentivize people to pledge on day one. You can also offer a digital high five reward tier for $1, anywhere between $1 and $5 really can help you. And it's not just helping in the financial aspect, but it's also helping add more individual backers to your campaign. So your total number of backers and your funding, your amount of funding can really impact the success of your campaign. And you'll have friends or just random people on Kickstarter who really like your story and maybe don't want to commit $20, $50, $100, but will do $1, $5 because they want to support you, and that's really helpful. Your timeline is pretty important. You want to make sure it's under 30 days, and fully funded campaigns actually are typically funded within the first 2 weeks, and week 3 and week 4 are really when you get overfunded. It's not always feasible, but Kickstarter likes if you can offer worldwide shipping. You can set different shipping price points. So if you want to offer free shipping in the US and allow people worldwide to also back your project and pay for shipping, you can segment that out. I know it's not always feasible, but if it is for you, you should offer it. And last but not least, the most important part, your funding goal. You really want to set it as low as is reasonably possible for you to deliver your project. And there are a few reasons for that. One of them is that Kickstarter does like to report on higher rates of percent funded. They want to say 110% funded. This project is 150% funded. This project got 200% funded in 2 weeks. They like being able to report out on that. But as I mentioned earlier, Kickstarter being an all or nothing platform, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you raised enough money to actually deliver on your project, but you didn't hit your goal. And now all of a sudden you have a few days left and you have to figure out how you're going to close that gap. Are you going to fund it yourself and just take a hit on fees? Or are you going to let that project fail and then launch a new project in the future? It's just really important to be reasonable with your funding goal. So now I'll pass it off to Tyler and he'll talk to you a little bit about Better Than Belts.
Yeah, so then to get into like our actual businesses and why we were on Kickstarter. So Better Than Belts, if you haven't heard of it, is a modern suspenders brand. Again, as I mentioned, the idea was kind of formed my senior year at Northeastern. I personally had stopped wearing belts. I thought they were super lame and uncomfortable, and I wanted to go buy suspenders, and I went to stores and Amazon and just scoured the web, and I couldn't find something that was really versatile enough to wear, with a t-shirt, a button down, kind of you could dress up, dress down to wear to class and kind of do whatever you needed with them. And being an entrepreneurship student where a lot of the classes are just like start a company, I was like, all right, let's like find a factory and see what happens. So then I was able to locate a factory in New York City, and we essentially created a very versatile suspender, something that was genderless, ageless. You could wear with anyone could wear with anything. And the reason why we ended up launching on Kickstarter instead of, say, a pre-order on our website, or even just straight up launching, because we didn't necessarily have the really high costs that we needed it, but it made a lot of sense from a marketing standpoint because we had heard from a separate Northeastern company, Slate Chocolate Milk. I heard them pitch one of my entrepreneurship classes my senior year, and this was before their Kickstarter launch, and they were planning on that. And they spoke to this ability to create super fans through Kickstarter, people that were truly invested in your company. And the marketing aspect of that, and all the psychology of, only having it available for 30 days and even limited in the number of rewards people can buy, and the fact that they're going to be the very first to get it. People love all of that, and it provides so much utility to us as founders of these businesses, because we get these people that are actually willing to engage with us, and will give you more information about your product because they are in tune with this early stage process. And it's always super helpful to just have the money before you have to deliver the product. So we did some things right and some things wrong with the Kickstarter. Thankfully, from speaking with previous Kickstarter founders or Kickstarter campaigns from Northeastern Ventures primarily, we were able to get a lot of things right. So one thing that I think is going to stand out as the most important, and should be before anyone launches their campaign or brand, is getting a ton of feedback. Not only on your product, but also, like I mentioned, from talking to people that have run other Kickstarter campaigns to get kind of everything done so you can hit a lot of those algorithmic goals that Tori was talking about earlier. So for day one, we were able to get 64% funded by the end of that day, which was really awesome for us, and threw us to be one of the top 9 fashion projects that was on Kickstarter. And how we did that was a lot of tips that I had picked up, including having a launch party, having people there in person. And one reason that we put so much kind of time and effort into that was because Kickstarter, it's inherently a very digital experience. People are pledging money online. The money's not going to get charged until later. The product isn't going to ship until some somewhat predetermined point. It's like the exact opposite of like walking into a store and buying something. So we wanted to make a very personal experience where we had essentially like befriended the manager of a juice store on Newberry Street and was like, hey, do you mind if we have like a lunch party here? And he was like, sure. So that was one way to have that kind of like be free in terms of that space. Granted, we did end up spending around $1,000 on the party in terms of paying for juice for people, as well as we had like a photo booth set up so people could actually see and touch the suspenders and try them on and take photos, as well as we had all of our Kickstarter rewards printed out on a piece of paper that was laminated as like a menu. And everybody got to like look at the stuff instead of having to like look at a computer, and then they could just hand it to someone. My friend Eric was there on a laptop, and you could tell him what you wanted and hand him the credit card, and then he would type in all the information. So made it a very in-person experience for something that was very digital. And I think that helped a ton with getting us towards that 64% funding on day one. And naturally that plays a lot into the algorithm. Of that other $3,000 that we spent in the very kind of basic early days, the other $1,000 was just towards legal fees of filing as an LLC. Mass isn't the cheapest of states, but it was easy to do. And then the other $1,000 was product, because we didn't want to launch a campaign. This was other tips from previous campaign runners, but it's tough to launch a campaign without actually having the finished product. So it was really important to have finalized goods. We had small quantities made, but that was where our last $1,000 went. This one that I'm wearing right now is actually one of the very first samples that we had made for it. This is one that people were seeing, touching, and trying on to know exactly what they would be receiving in the mail. So then we were able to get to our full funding goal within 2 weeks, again, playing within our algorithm goal, really hoping to get that, and it worked. And a lot of that was from, again, kind of what I'm talking about in terms of like being in person for something that is so digital. We went to HubSpot's Inbound conference, we went to Drift's Hypergrowth conference, we went to Open Newberry Street. We were just kind of everywhere we could be, finding other people and talking to them, handing them suspenders, asking them to try them on, getting feedback, but also kind of like what I talked about with being a super fan. Like we asked them to try on the suspenders and took a quick video of them throwing their belt aside. And we took all of these videos and we made these little GIFs that we put on our Kickstarter campaign. And we also then posted it on social and we tagged these people. And then these people, you know, naturally kind of as like a micro influencer almost, like it was very cool. They felt so inclined to it to have like met the founders and then become a part of the campaign page. Like they were then involved. So making it very personal from that was awesome. And we also had feedback from a super backer. So somebody that does constantly back Kickstarters. He was like, I love your product. I love your campaign. I'm not going to give you money. And we were like, oh, why? And he was like, I don't think you're actually going to be able to ship. Like he had been burned too many times by that, which is common with Kickstarter. So then we had a new Kickstarter update where we were like, hey, everybody, we actually have product here. Like we're ready to ship a lot of this stuff. So to really show that you are ready and you kind of are who you are, and to trying to not be like a lot of the fraud that does exist out there. But that doesn't mean we didn't do anything wrong. One of our main strategies was going to be press. PR is incredibly difficult and nobody wants to write about a campaign that hasn't even launched yet. So we did a lot of cold outreach that came up completely short. And the only time we then did get stories was after we had like seen a lot of success in funding. So I think we probably could have done a much better job in terms of where we were actually allocating kind of our time and effort. Because when you're, you know, bootstrapped, which for us is if you don't have like angel or VC funding or anything, and you're really using your own money and trying to stay as lean as possible, and you're not paying for a PR agency, you're not paying for a ton of advertising. In fact, we paid for 0 advertising during our campaign. Our time is kind of what our currency was. And we could have done a better job with Kickstarter updates. That was something about campaigns that we didn't necessarily focus a ton on, but is a large thing people do, is putting out updates like very frequently. A great way to keep engaging those super backers. And when you put out an update and then your followers, if they like that and comment on it, that also plays big into the Kickstarter algorithm. And then another big thing that people will talk about is cross promotions with other live Kickstarters. If you ever backed a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or anything, you know what I'm talking about, those emails. And at the very end, it's like, here's like some words from our friends. And they list a few other campaigns that kind of have similar demographics. We did that pretty in a half-baked approach, which wasn't incredibly successful for us. And I think that a lot of it is attributed to that it's hard to necessarily find a similarity with kind of a niche fashion product. But we just didn't think it through all the time because our bandwidth was spread pretty thin, and then we didn't like focus where we could have. Also influencers, we also did like a very half-baked approach where we found people that we thought were interesting and sent them suspenders. But we didn't do it in a way where it was like, hey, we're launching on this date. It'd be great if you could post about it then. We were just kind of like, give us feedback on it. We just were putting it out there. And lastly, our video, as Tori mentioned, it really should be under 60 seconds. If people don't know what your product is or how you're different, like by immediately landing on your Kickstarter page, you probably need to fix things. Our video, we just had too much fun with it and got out of hand, and it was like 2.5 minutes, but really 60 seconds would have communicated everything we needed to. And next, I want to pass this over to Danny.
Hey, everyone. You know, we did 2 Kickstarters with Peak State. And as I mentioned briefly in the beginning, in case somebody joined late, you know, we've introduced coffee with benefits. So we have a dark roast to help with de-stressing, a medium roast for immunity, and a light roast for your brain and for focus. And there's a lot going on because our technology came from infusing coffee beans during the roasting process with some extracts of ingredients that people don't always get in their diet that have some amazing benefits. And so, we had to figure out how to market all this information on the Kickstarter platform. And but before I really dive into our nitty-gritty experience, I think it's just good for me to talk about why we did a Kickstarter. So, you have this idea. I'm sure some of you have ventures that you're working on. There's no better way to just figure out if people will pay for it before you make it. And Kickstarter is so great for customer validation that way. Another one, before you have 100,000 in revenues, you're what's considered in the valley of death. And people say, well, go raise a friends and family round, and you don't really know how to do that. But Kickstarter is a great way to do that, because you can tell your grandma and your uncle, hey, I'm going to go all in and launch this project. And then it makes a really easy platform for them to get involved and support you, as well as a bunch of other people that are hopefully going to be customers that you've never interacted with before. As Tyler mentioned, you get a ton of marketing from the Kickstarter platform, because you're posting on all your social accounts, and you end up, having your friends post, hopefully. And so, hopefully if you journalists want to pick it up, especially if you play the algorithm well, Kickstarter will put you on their homepage. People sometimes do want to write about you when it's so clear that you've hit a home run in the project. So then there's cash flow. We did our second Kickstarter because we were still in a pandemic, and we wanted to keep selling stuff before we even made it, because obviously spending money on inventory before it's accounted for means you need to take out a loan or some sort. But Kickstarter lets you do the opposite. So we just kept using it to make sure that the money came in before it went out. I think point number 5 is like my favorite, because you're building a business and you have a product that you're working on, and the challenge is you're afraid to ship it, and Kickstarter just forces you to put it out there. Finally, like I said, customer acquisition is so invaluable. 40% of our customers on our first Kickstarter came from the platform, and that's people that we didn't have before. So again, that falls into marketing, but customer acquisition is a huge benefit of Kickstarter. So our first campaign, this was our first time doing a Kickstarter. We were fully funded with 193 backers, but we learned a lot, and we increased our goal by about 50%. And we're also funded on our second campaign, and Kickstarter gave us the Project We Love badge. They do like repeat customers from their perspective. They like people who do more than one campaign. So we'll probably do a third or even a fourth at some point. All right, so what did we do wrong? And a lot of this pertains to our first platform. We launched in April 2020. It was, and people were scared. They were, yes, in front of screens in their homes, but they were so distracted emotionally, and just like, it just wasn't a great time. As a result, we weren't able to do a launch party, but we also figured we should just launch anyways, because historically in a recession, it only gets worse over time. So we just kept going. We changed our video twice because it just felt tone deaf to be like, here's a product, you should buy it in the middle of April 2020. We got greedy on how much we were charging for the products. I learned later that it turns out Kickstarter backers, the traffic that comes from the platform, expect to be sort of offered a discount below retail for supporting you early. We did not keep it simple, stupid. That's pardon that expression, but I just we got really technical and jargony with a lot of our marketing terms, and the second time we really cleaned that up. And then finally, we had product images. We didn't make sure that our product images that we were displaying exactly matched what people were going to get in the mail. And that's hard to do, but definitely it's good to partner with a great designer that you trust. Doesn't need to necessarily be an expensive one, to make sure that all your graphics are looking exactly like what you plan to ship. But we did do things right. So one of those things is we were really good at numbers, and we had our unit economics like completely calculated out to make sure we were going to make a profit in the worst scenarios of our Kickstarter campaign, so long as we were fully funded. So know your unit economics, and that includes, as Tori mentioned in the beginning, the Kickstarter fees and the credit card fees and the cost of shipping. And if you are doing something that is a marketing related activity during the platform, associate a cost of acquisition of each Kickstarter customer and make sure you're building that into your unit economics. We're shameless about telling family and friends, in the week before, I called 30 of my closest friends and family. I said, hey, I'm doing this thing. The day before, I called them again just to remind them that it launched the next day. They all got emails on launch day. I was using LinkedIn to connect with old colleagues to let them know about my new project and old classmates. I was using Facebook Messenger and Instagram DMs, whatever it took to get people to know about my project. And I asked them, hey, I'm embarrassed to be asking you, but if you could support our project on day one, it would be extremely helpful. And then finally, we sort of, any business that was either helping our brand or that we'd interacted with, and even journalists, we just called them all partners, like without formally even having that sort of name on our relationship yet. And we just said, hey, I'm just letting our partners know we're launching a Kickstarter in case you're able to share it. And they all shared on their social platforms. And that was kind of awesome. So yeah. Second time around, we did price to reward people for being our super fans, and we basically said, hey, you can save up to 40% if you back us on day one, and you'll also save up to 30% any of the other days if you back us during our Kickstarter. We ran a rewards program, so for the 2 months prior, if you shared our pre-launch page, which Kickstarter will give you one, if you had a friend give their email to sign up to be notified, then you would earn sort of peak state dollars, where you'd get $10 towards or a future order. So we used that to drive emails before launch, and we ended up getting way more emails to notify on launch day. And then during the campaign, if anybody referred somebody else to back the campaign, you also got peak state dollars. So we used a rewards program to drive certain actions that helped us advance our overall funding goal, which is to get more people and more pledges. And Kickstarter has a referral code feature. I strongly recommend you use that built-in feature because it's just great. Finally, our first Kickstarter platform, we had a video that was much more story oriented about how, here's our story and how we all got started. And then the second time around, we just said, here's a product and here's how it benefits you. And most of all, this is what's in it for you. But it's a really cool, innovative product, and kept it simpler that way. And that allowed us to make a shorter video that apparently was even more impactful. So while that's the only thing that was really surprising, is you normally want to tell your story. And in this case, it was more effective to not. We also leveraged a lot of in-person events. It was during the pandemic for us both times. And so I would start hiking coffee to the top of mountains and handing out free samples and letting people know about our Kickstarter. And I have people that come up to me at farmers markets now who are like, I tried your coffee on the top of a mountain. And so we found some virality with in-person events. And in grocery stores during the pandemic, everybody was waiting outside in these lines. So I would just show up and hand little samples of our product and let them know, but with a link to our Kickstarter on the back and a call to action with a deadline. So get creative, figure out where the need is most acute, where your customers might want your product, and try to leverage those in-person events to get your Kickstarter funded. Awesome, and that's all we have. Let's hear from you guys. We'd love to hear about your ventures and what questions you have about the Kickstarter platform.
So I'm gonna just read out some questions. Everyone's muted, so if you have questions, definitely throw them into the chat. We have a question from Devin here. Do we recommend the $1 reward tier in addition to the make a pledge without a reward option?
Yes, 100%. I think it's like what Danny said with like keeping it simple, like the make a pledge without a reward. I don't think people completely understand necessarily like what that means almost, especially for those that aren't familiar with the Kickstarter campaign, which might be a fair amount of people that you're like, texting and emailing a ton to try to do it. So if you have like within the realm of everything, just one that is just like it's marked $1 and it's just like you're helping us, like did that digital high five, like thank you, like we'll keep you in the loop of stuff. That is something that kind of has become a good industry standard almost within Kickstarter that people then will be more likely to kind of click on and do out things like that. And that was actually something that we didn't launch with and then added to our campaign probably like a week into it because we realized that we were kind of messing up by not having it.
I think one of the benefits of that, of providing the reward tier for $1, is that it totally eliminates the thought that people need to have, like, how much do I want to pledge without a reward?
Mhm.
Okay, we have another question from Matthew. Did any of us have patents on our products, and do they need to be completed before we launch on Kickstarter?
I can speak to that, Tori. We have a patentable process for infusing our coffee beans. Notice that word that I said, patentable. You know, a patent really gives you the right to sue somebody. And, you know, my background in engineering, like patents are exciting to me, don't get me wrong. And they're an important part of an intellectual property strategy. But your goal is to make sure you have a business first. So I would encourage you to not disclose that super proprietary IP, but rather the benefits of the product that you're making. And you could use the word, hey, patentable, you know, as long as you know the criteria of a patent: novelty, utility, non-obviousness, and you think that you are patentable, just market that it's patentable. Or if you're really sure that you're gonna need a patent to succeed and you're going global with it, then get a provisional patent. And then you can say patent pending. But I do not recommend, because patents can cost you $15,000 to $20,000. I do not recommend spending that kind of money before you've found a market or customers. So, you know, this is not to be construed as legal advice, but I would just say that you have a really innovative, patentable technology and leave it at that. That'd be my advice.
We didn't patent anything. We didn't really have anything patentable with it. A lot of it was brand driven. And it wasn't until post Kickstarter that we actually did end up filing a trademark. So we have IP there. But as far as patentable, I'll just like echo what Danny was saying in terms of this really isn't the kind of section of your business life where you're, you know, looking to spend that $20,000 to make sure that you're locked in. This is where you're still making sure that this is a viable business idea, that you have customers that want this. And then we have some lovely other questions. I think Tori lost Wi-Fi, but she'll be coming back, I'm assuming, in a minute. But Danny, why did you end up choosing Kickstarter over Indiegogo?
For me, Kickstarter, you know, was one of the first. It has an association with for-profit ventures. I think depending on your project, a different platform could make sense. I also liked the required commitment of all or nothing for myself. If I'm going to dedicate my life to an idea, I want to know that there's enough interest in it, that it's a good one. And if there isn't, then it's going to save me a bunch of headache for me to have some like $10,000 goal with $2,000 and then not know what to do with it. So I want to know my idea is good enough. And that's why all or nothing was actually enticing for me. And everybody that I looked up to was using Kickstarter at the time. And there's so much data about how to succeed on it that it felt like a sure thing to use for me. Why did you guys choose Kickstarter?
Yeah, Kickstarter, definitely the all or nothing Kickstarter, like as a brand, is very legitimate. And that's why, like, for example, the customer data stays with them as opposed to something that then we can own. Kickstarter, they exist as a very, very strong third party that is reputable. Indiegogo, for me, granted, you can do the all or nothing stuff on there. A lot of the other platforms, I just think were kind of smaller, and we were hoping to benefit from kind of the brand name of Kickstarter as well as the amount of people there. And one, anecdotally, something for size, which I think is really good to benefit. Well, also, when you launch a Kickstarter, you will get 40,000 emails immediately from every agency that's fake or real that could exist. And one of the real ones that I was talking to, I talked to them about Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and they said their company exists to support kind of this back end of Kickstarter and Indiegogo backers. And that company itself was larger than Indiegogo. Just like as an example of how much larger Kickstarter is, like the majority of their business was Kickstarter. Kickstarter is just a much larger platform, and that provides so much more utility.
Somebody had a question about how much time spent planning. I guess in my experience, we spend 2 to 3 months. The more, the better, but just make sure you don't spend forever thinking about your product and planning. Make sure you just ship at some point. How long did you guys spend?
Yeah, I think our initial plan was to launch in May of 2019, and we launched in August of 2019. And it was really because we took the entire summer to prepare there. So I would say a very similar like 3-month period. And sure, we could have made it, we could have gotten, I think the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule comes into play big time here, where if you can get 80% complete with what you think is like done, like you're ready to press go on that campaign. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
One question about design, branding work. So always good to, know what you do best and outsource the rest. So like if you're a graphic design major and you know branding, then do that yourself. Otherwise, if you're like me, I found somebody else that was willing to do it. The two that you're gonna definitely need for the average venture that doesn't have this experience in house is the videographer and a designer. And maybe, I've seen some really innovative things. Some people say, hey, I'll give you a percentage of our overall funds raised, 10% for the videographer, that 5%, 5 to 10% for the designer, depending on who you work with. So I've seen other people use Fiverr for their designer to keep it as absolutely cheap as possible. I went a little higher end and I found a friend and I paid the family friends rate for the design, and I paid the family friends rate for the videography. But you can get creative there, and I would just recommend at least those 2 service providers to help you with your campaign, and expect to spend some money on your Kickstarter. It's the only way to really give it a fair shot.
Yeah, design is so important, as well as that video. I thankfully had just been graduating, so one of my friends who was a videographer, she actually did all of our photo and video pro bono, and I just like bought her a lot of meals, and I was like, just thank you so much for everything you're doing. And as far as designing and branding, it's something that I had kind of been self-teaching for all of my time at Northeastern. I just thought design and illustration was super interesting. So thankfully I was good enough to get us to launch. We did end up working with Scout at Northeastern to do a full design overhaul and get it very legit. But again, I was able to take us to 80%, which got us good enough for launch. And then for reaching out for Kickstarters for cross promotion in a compelling way, it can definitely be tough because there is so much just kind of noise in the space. A lot of ours came from, so one of the first companies that I reached out to, I think they were like a versatile pants company. And I was like, there's some potential overlap here. And the way they actually had like, the way they formatted their cross promotions was through like, they had this unlisted Medium article, and it was just like that kind of the way that interaction worked. Then I was like, oh, this is cool. This is then how I will take that to other Kickstarters that I'm reaching out to. And a lot of them, it doesn't start with like just a cold ask of, hey, do you want to like go promotion for promotion? A lot of it was like, oh, like this project looks really cool. Like, I like what you're working on, especially if it's a project that you see that you think could work very well. And if you back their project, when you message them, they see that you have backed their project and you're messaging them. And for me, that was always way more legitimate of seeing somebody that actually like kind of put their money where their mouth was, before reaching out to me in some capacity. And also with cross promotion, like dollar values are important, but I think what we were always looking for is the number of backers, because that's really what you're kind of considering. So if we at the point, we ended with like 200 backers. If we were like halfway through and had like 100, it wasn't somebody that had 1,000 backers wasn't going to be able to work with us. They likely weren't, no matter how many, no matter how good that pitch was. So getting people that kind of are in similar positions as you as well as like really thinking about who those backers are. Like one of them that we had been talking with, we didn't actually end up working out, but they were launching this eco-friendly ski wax. And we were like, these products are so different than suspenders, but we believe that our customers actually could have overlap in terms of where they're looking at for kind of consciousness in manufacturing as well as other ideas. So a lot of that promotion just comes from being very authentic in who you're reaching out to and why you're talking to them.
I see a question about agencies, and
Yeah.
it all kind of relates in cross promotion. You know, Kickstarter shows you where your backers came from. It has this amazing pie chart, and it just tells you. And if there's one piece of advice I have about this entire experience is your best strategy is going to be equipping your network to share and back your campaign. Like, you can run paid ads, and if you have a product that, if you are a digital marketing wizard, like Tyler and Tori are really smart with digital marketing, I'm okay, I'm not like them. And unless you're like some sort of wizard and you know that your cost per click, yeah, like I said about unit economics, if you know that you can run ads and they're going to convert in a way that isn't just going to spend a ton of money for each pledge, there's enough profit margin built in that you're going to be able to afford paying for paid marketing, then spend all your time reaching out to your network, build a list of stakeholders, 500 people from your life that you're going to email or message or contact or text, and just tell them that way. And that's going to be 10 times more effective, maybe 100 times more effective than running paid ads, at least until you've reached some sort of minimum percent funded that you start to get some exposure from. That's my advice about. So I guess I'm generally saying don't use a marketing agency. But what do you guys think about that, Tyler, Tori?
Yeah. Agencies, there's a dime a dozen. There's so many, and they're all going to reach out to you. I personally haven't heard of Launch Bloom. If you look, so one of the fun things with Kickstarter, if you go to a campaign and you see like who created it and you click on that, you can see the other collaborators on it. And if you go to anybody that has over $1 million, I can almost guarantee you that one of their collaborators is, I believe they're called Jellup. And that's the digital marketing agency. The people that have raised, VC funding likely and are actually putting money into marketing, they're then going to work with like this massive agency. But for the majority of us, that is not the position that we're in. I do not think that working with agencies is a good use of money. As far as like agencies, and we can bucket that into like other products, I know BackerKit, for example, is a very well-respected agency kind of that you partner with. They're not like marketing for you, but what they do is a lot on the back end of helping make sure you can like fulfill everybody's orders with what exactly they want and stuff. And I think that's really important if you have a complex product that has multiple variations. So I definitely would recommend them in terms of, I just know other projects that have used it. But in terms of other agencies, like you'll get so much outreach, and if anybody's willing to promote it for free, or so much of them are like, hey, like we have our own email list almost of like our own super fans, like, do you want to be a part of it? Or we have our own Facebook page or something. If anybody's willing to promote stuff for free, then yeah, you can do that. Or you can always, I believe we mentioned too, that you can make these unique Kickstarter links so that you can follow the attribution to see if money actually came from that. So when we did some of those, there was one that had reached out and it was just like, you could just post your project on their own thing. And I gave that with its own unique URL and made a few $100s from it. And I was like, okay, so that was actually a legitimate one. But overall, I'm not particularly a fan of agencies. And I like what Danny said in terms of like, you kind of can be, you can pound the pavement yourself and really find all the people you need to kind of get it done. And if you get to the point, where you have lucky enough to blow up to $50,000, $100,000 or something, maybe then you work with somebody like Jellup. But I think the minimum spends monthly for people like Jellup is $10,000 to $30,000 on Facebook ads. And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, we're sort of giving the bootstrapper's guide to Kickstarter. So if
Yeah.
that's where you're at,
Hey,
this is
Danny.
what that advice pertains to.
Yeah, can I ask directly here too, or just?
Yeah, go for it, John.
So Danny, your point about activating your network, did you kind of do like a lead up to the launch?
Yeah, we
And
use
like
something called,
what's the timeline? You almost like preheat your own network and then start building your list that way, or how'd you do that?
yeah, we use something called Gleam, gleam.io, and it basically let us create our own rewards program. And we did have a website, right? So we used all of our existing customers and basically said, hey, you want to earn free coffee and gear because we have like sweet hats and stuff, then just check this link out. And this link just basically said, you know, go follow our YouTube channel, 5 points, you know, and a point 5 points might convert to $1 or something, who knows. And the, you know, and put, you know, sign up to be notified on our Kickstarter launch, you know, 10 points. And so, and that would require them going to our Kickstarter page, and all the rewards program will drive these specific actions in a very organized, clean way. And so, yeah, that's what we did. So probably 2-3 months is even better prior to the launch. If you're really good at like project management and timelines, like, yeah, do it as far out as advanced as you can, and just try to get as many emails. Sorry, I have an airplane going by. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, no, it's helpful. I mean, that's what I was wondering is like how far in advance you kind of take your whole world and then try to like put them in your funnel sort of, and then down to like a certain number of people who are gonna back your campaign. And then hopefully, yeah, they share as well, right? I mean, I don't know that you could necessarily expect that, but from I think those are some of the big questions, is like from a timeline and a budget. You've hit on this stuff, but you know, if you're going to develop a product, there's all like the product development costs, like, you know, even bootstrapping it the way you guys have done, as opposed to working with agencies, how much time to build in, and then what's like a realistic budget for things like the video, design work. I know, you know, you can buy people lunch, stuff like that, but yeah, I guess it's all depends kind of what your approach is. Maybe a direct question would be, and sorry to ramble, would be, on the video specifically, do you know if it makes a difference like on the quality of the video, or could you do just as well with like a homemade video that has like really good content, as opposed to, you know, you pay an agency, it's got a really good polish, but I don't know, maybe that's not what people want. Maybe people want just talk to me and tell me why you made this thing.
Kickstarter seems to recommend good production quality. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of money spent. It just means somebody with a decent camera, not just, you know, I always liked, you know, there's a guy at a marketing agency that told me, you know, that they asked me, what's the perfect length of a video? And this contradicts what Tyler and Tori said. And I said, well, I don't know, a minute or less. And they said, it's whatever amount of time that people don't get bored. So like, as long as your video is fascinating and captivating, and just show it to somebody, see if their eyes glaze over or they look away or check their phone at any point. And if that happens, then your video is too long. So I think it's more of a black box. Like, as long as it's captivating and the quality is like decent, and even, you know, then it's going to be okay. I would recommend one to 2,000 on the video, just in my experience. Tyler, Tori, anything from you guys on the video?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's as long as like people's attention will be held. I think that's super important. That's probably why 60 seconds at least has become a rule of thumb, just because people will commit that much time to it. I want to say that I do think like homemade is going to an authentic homemade video, I believe, and from what I've seen, is going to do way better than just something that has production quality. Just anecdotally, a company that I'd worked for in the past, an ad that I had made that was a bit lower resolution, but explained a lot of the just value prop, ended up outperforming a $50,000 ad that was through an agency, and it was something I made in the matter of an afternoon. like cost dollars compared to, you know, tens of thousands and multiple production days, or maybe it was 1 or 2 full production days. And it's especially with Kickstarter, trying to build trust is kind of so important. So if you can truly be yourself and people know who they're backing, then that's great. And one thing I'll also highlight just about videos in general is that people would much rather watch a video that's like low resolution but has great audio than a video that has like perfect 4K resolution but crap audio. So like if you're gonna make a homemade video and you're like, oh, like should I buy this nice camera? Like your smartphone is gonna take a good enough video quality. If anything, I'd invest in a $25 mic and like be mic'd up. And for anything like that, because a lot of that clarity is actually what comes through to kind of keep people engaged. I do think $1,000 to $2,000 seems like a very reasonable budget for getting it made if you have, you know, zero video skills and want someone, whether it's, you know, a family friend or somebody else to do that. But again, you can get creative in terms of like, hey, I'll give you $1,000 now and I'll give you an extra $1,000 if it gets funded, because then you can get them to also have some stake in it. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was the timeline of reaching out to people. I did not use a like mail merge type service or anything. I just had a notes that had like 100 names of people that I was like personally texting in like the days leading up to it and on the day of. And my text to them was not like, hey, please give me money. It was, hey, like the project is live. Like, please check it out. That'd be awesome. If you don't want to back it, like no worries at all. That's totally cool. It would be just as helpful if you shared it with a friend, if you posted it on social or something, or even just texted it to somebody. So a lot of my asks were kind of like an either or, because if you just ask somebody for money, you know, they can give you a yes or no. But if you ask them like, hey, consider backing it or share it, because that's like just as useful, that seems like the much lesser of two evils for people that say don't want to buy your product.
One final wrap up on the video. Look at projects that are successes in your category of the past. The coolest thing about Kickstarter is you can literally find similar projects that were funded $50, $100,000+. And like we did that with coffee, and the best video was text on screen with no audio. Like the most funded project in the coffee category rather was just text on screen showing their product and giant benefit callouts that were like, it's like the simplest thing, something that, you know, also imagine if the audio, if they were scrolling on their phone and watched the video there and they're like in a business meeting or something and they just wanted to get it, right? So text on screen can go a really long way, and you could probably pay someone on Fiverr to make a video like that for a couple $100 or less. So I don't really know the exact answer. I can just tell you that I've spent anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 on video production for my projects.
Yeah.
Also, reward tiers. We didn't talk about this, but minimize your reward tiers. Having 3 to 7 reward options is way better than having, 25.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's the keeping it simple. Just like understand that people aren't going to spend a lot of time actually on this page. So the most you can communicate, the most that they can see from like a quick meme, that's literally how you can simplify stuff to maximize your rewards. As a last question, feel free to throw it in there. Otherwise, Bernice, I'll probably hand this over to you.
Yeah, so I guess that wraps up our discussion. Thank you to everyone in the audience for attending, and thank you so much to Tori, Tyler, and Danny for this great insight despite the technical difficulties. We definitely got a lot to take away from the conversation, so really thank you. And also invite you to check out our website, which houses a range of resources for any career or entrepreneurial goals that you might have, and some information on how to get involved with the community. So
yeah, and I'll also say too, if anybody has any like detailed questions or anything, feel free to shoot me an email. Always happy to talk, especially if you have an existing like campaign page that wants feedback on, or simply a product idea.
Likewise for me.